Hello, I'm Tom Gilson, Associate Editor of Against the Grain, and I'm here at the Charleston Conference in the Francis Marion Hotel in the Penthouse Suites. And with me is Jack Montgomery, who is the Collection Development Librarian at Western Kentucky University. And we're here to talk to Stephen Bell, who is the Associate University Librarian for Research and Information Services. Stephen, welcome to the Penthouse.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you. It's great to be here today.
Well, we're really delighted to have you with us. And we wanted to talk a little bit this morning in your plenary session. You talked a little bit about, in fact, you talked a lot about our need to design our libraries with this idea, and then this is both physically and virtually.
Yes, if we can.
With this idea of collisions.
Yes.
And I was wondering if you could kind of...
Sure, I'll be glad to do that. So I think throughout time, people have always had sort of these serendipitous or good accidents, as sometimes called, experiences. And I think every librarian at some point in their career has probably heard a story from someone who related how they had this collision with the collections in a library and that there was some good outcome. And one of the examples that I gave in the talk this morning was of Martha Spiegel. She is a world-renowned expert on bees. And in this video clip that I showed in the presentation, she was relating how she was a bored 18-year-old and just happened to come across a book about bees. And she said that she read the entire book that night, and she was really fascinated by the subject, so much so that she evolved into quite possibly the world's foremost bee expert. And I think that's a great story, and we've heard that story many times about people who have told librarians that it was some collision with a book in the collection that changed their life in some way. So I tried to share with the attendees today that this is not a trivial thing that happens, but it could be a very significant and profound event in someone's life to have a collision with the collection. And as I talked about today, I am wondering if in our libraries we are designing things in a way that the chances of that happening are reduced. And if that's the case, then I think that would be an unfortunate thing for the world, because we can see how progress is made through people discovering new mysteries like Martha Spivak did and then exploring them further. So I think that's part of the challenge of how do we design the library or the system so that these kinds of collisions are more likely to occur. And I'm not suggesting it's an easy thing to do, but I did try to give some examples today.
I know you mentioned there's a social and a sort of a climate change in terms of views of education that has impacted this.
Well, I did refer to some changes I think that are happening in society at large about the perspective on what is higher education, where it might have one time been seen more as a learning experience where I become a thoughtful, critical thinking person who's interested in a wide range of topics. It's become more narrow in the perspective in that unfortunately, people tend to be looking at college now more as a career preparation activity. And this can be understandable because college is very expensive in many cases. We know that students go into debt in many cases, and so it's not unexpected that the students and their parents would be looking at college as an important part of the life where you're learning to prepare for a career, and that then you will get the career so that you can pay off your loans, and that may be having an impact on fewer students going into the fields where they are more likely to be going into libraries and having these collisions, or when they do take courses like in the general education curriculum, they may be less likely to want to have that experience because they're thinking, why do I need to go to the library? I'm not here to learn about those subjects. I'm here to become an architect or an engineer or an accountant. And that could also be an unfortunate thing. Yeah.
Well, I think one of the things that I noticed when you showed the video of the students in front of Temple, in front of the university library, most of them hadn't had that experience with a book. They hadn't.
A few, most did not.
Most had not, and then, but I was also struck. About half of them had never been in the library at all. Do
Yeah.
you think that libraries and our resources? Do you think students think or realize that the library and its resources have any part in their research and what they're to be doing at the end of the college?
Well, that's a part of the conversation that I did not really get to in the talk today, because I think there's a whole other element to that challenge of how do we get students into the library so that they can have the type of experience that I think their faculty members want them to have. And I talked a little bit about how faculty members believe that students should be getting into the library and that they should be having collisions with the collections. And I think in part it goes back to the faculty members' own nostalgic longing
Sure.
for a part of their own college experience,
Right.
and that they would like to see students having that as well. But the question is, what can we be doing to collaborate with faculty to get them to be getting students into the library? I mean, how many of our faculty are willing to take the time to say, hey, students, let's go over to the library and go to the section of the stacks where we'll see the resources related to this subject, or in the digital environment to show students how they could use search techniques to be doing more exploration in the library's digital materials, or to again collaborate with a librarian in some way to be making that happen. So I had mentioned some of the challenges we face, but I think as is always the case, whether it's with instruction activity or anything where we need faculty collaboration to happen, this whole area of how do we get students to have serendipitous exposure to our collections, I think part of it has to be faculty getting involved in it.
Let me follow up with one thing, a question. It seems that libraries are undermining that in some ways. We're doing that, and I think of storing books, and you mentioned this in your
Yes.
talk, the storage of books, also in discovery systems. And many times libraries are buried at the bottom of the scroll. I mean, not libraries, but books are buried at the bottom of the scroll. What's your take on that?
Well, it's the perspective I shared is that, and I'm not being critical of librarians here, but I did say that we are kind of in between a rock and a hard place in that while as much as we would like to be exposing our students and our faculty to the collections, because user expectations are changing and students are looking for more people space in the libraries where they want to have collaborative workspaces, study rooms, cafes, lounge areas, all those types of things. The only way many of us can do that is to sacrifice space dedicated to the book collections for these new areas. And we do this in different ways. We might just move them off-site to remote storage areas. We might put them in high-density shelving within the library, or we might, or usually in the case of the new construction, but sometimes renovation as well, to build remote automated storage, ASRS systems in our libraries. And those are part of the challenge we face. But I think when we do that, it is engineering the serendipity out of the library experience. And so we talked a little bit in the conversation this morning about what sort of technological breakthroughs might we have in the future that might create more virtual browsing opportunities so that we don't lose out. But unfortunately, and some people had said this to me after the session, I understand what you were saying, but no matter how technologically sophisticated things get, we will always somehow miss out on the tactile experience of connecting with books that are in the collections if we don't have exposure to them. And that's also the challenge of moving to digital. Where's that tactile experience?
You mentioned the one library that you'd been in that had books behind glass. I've actually seen that too, and I remember thinking it's rendered the books an exhibit rather than something that is to be interacted with. I know that's what you were referring to. It's turned the library the books into a relic.
You kind of get that feel.
Yeah.
And I said it was somewhat ironic that people were gathering around to watch the robotic system retrieve the books, but I then wondered how many of those folks are actually going to go and look at a book.
Right.
Is it inspiring them to say, I want to interact with the collection, or it's, well, this is this is great technology, but I'm not really going to use it myself.
Right.
I know in my own scholarly research, the ability to scan shelves, and while I went after a certain title, I found something else sitting right next to it that was far better for my research, and I thought, they're not getting that anymore.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you had a collision with the collection.
I did, no doubt. Do you think that digital and print library collections are still necessary in this world where Google and the free web are so dominant? I know you.
I certainly do.
I know, but what about, do you think, students? How do you think they think of it, in your experience at Temple?
Well, I think they do. Well, it's hard to generalize about the students. They're all across the spectrum, and I will say that at Temple University, which is an institution, it's a public university, that we see many students who are first generation, and given the nature of the school library situation, we do get students who have never been in libraries before, and they don't come from a book culture within the family, so I think those students to some extent really don't know what to make of a large research university library, and so they might be questioning, what is the value here for me? And so I think that's part of our education mission, to expose students to these things and to do it in collaboration with faculty. And on occasion, you see great outcomes from that effort, in which when they're getting close to the graduation, we see really great examples of student research, and we have a research prize at our library. So we have a competition, and we get dozens of submissions. And then we have a program where the students come and talk about their research and how they use the resources. And it is really great to hear about the students that have made the discoveries, and some new mystery has unfolded for them, and that they really were motivated to go and do the research. So I believe that at some point, hopefully, we can make that transition in the student's mind that there's really great value to be found in the print and digital works in the library. So we certainly do try to advocate for faculty allowing us to work with them to expose students to the riches that we offer.
In your blog from the Bell Tower, you wrote that our search engines and our search systems are too complex.
I write a lot of things, but thank you for reminding me of it.
But the thing that struck me about, as I wrote further, is that you were advocating that we needed to move from search engines to answer engines. And could you explain that?
Well, I think that's where things are going. Well, and I want to just say that I think the message I was trying to say is that it's not a bad thing necessarily to be overly complex. If you go back to a lot of the writings of Don Norman, who is one of the fathers of user experience research, he makes this point that sometimes you just can't simplify things. The cockpit of a modern jet cannot be simplified, but it can be designed in a way that it's complex, but it's not confusing. Things are where you expect them to be, and they work the way you expect them to work. And the question is, do our library research systems do that, or are they confusing? So it might be one thing to understandably have them be complex in some ways, more complex than a search engine, because the great thing about that complexity is that it gives you the capacity to do some really unique and interesting things with your search. But where things seem to be headed is more artificial intelligence. So if you think of things today like a Siri or a Google Now, where you're just trying to prompt it with a simple question and have it tell you the answer, I think that's where the information companies are headed, and that we don't want to just give you a list of results that you then have to go through to figure out what the answer is. We're actually going to try to tell you the answer to your question. And I don't know exactly how that would work, but I think I don't know how many years, maybe it's just 5, 10, who knows, down the road, that's where the artificial intelligence might be heading us, that it's not just searching, but we're going to actually tell you the answer to your question. And the more these systems know about us and the things we look for, it might even be more predictive, that they're saying, here's what I think you might want to know about whatever it is you're doing today. So I don't know if that's a scary thing, but
Well, it's sort of,
it's kind of
sounds
interesting.
Like it thwarts the virtual serendipity idea that you can still have that serendipitous experience in a virtual environment. What can librarians do as professionals, though, to help? What do you see us being able to do and able to? How do we
Create more opportunities?
Yes, create more
Well, I talked a
opportunities.
little bit about that in the talk today, and I think part of it was with the physical collections. One thing we can do is to try to put the content where people don't expect to find it. So one example I gave is putting books in a computer space. So the students are going there to use the computers, and many people have recognized that, well, one of the reasons many students will come to the library today is for the study rooms, access to computers, and all those great things. Why not put some books over in those spaces so that students can stumble upon them?
So if you had a virtual commons to sort of place some well thought out examples.
Yeah, and I've seen good examples in libraries where you might even have some just fiction, nonfiction, popular things, graphic novels, just to hopefully tap into students' interests and curiosity about, here's some things. I also, I mentioned that I think public libraries are particularly good at this because they understand impulse shopping and impulse zones where someone's checking out or going for something, they're in a hurry, maybe they want to pick up a DVD, also putting some things there that are unexpected. And then people are doing some other novel things. I mentioned blind date with a book, which is an idea that surfaced in public libraries, but now some academic libraries are trying it, where you can simply create up a exhibit of books, but they're wrapped up in like a white paper or a brown paper, so the person doesn't really know what the book is, and then there are some clues written on the outside, so it kind of gets the person wondering, what's this book about? And hopefully they have a kind of fortuitous interaction with that book, and it gets them interested in some subject matter. So I think there are some things you can do with the physical collections that might help get people to start colliding with them. And I did say in the talk that it can be quite a challenge to do that with the digital items that you can't even physically connect with. So that's going to be a challenge for us as we shift from print to digital.
Yeah, well, that was actually going to be my next question. Have you seen any examples where that's being done? I mean, in library databases for ebooks, say, where people can somehow browse through them or have a synchronistic interaction with an ebook?
Well, I think part of where the technology is going, and I showed an example from the Digital Public Library of America, where they just recently introduced a virtual browse of the content. And it actually works rather nicely. I mean, you can browse quickly through the items that they might appear in the order of a shelf. Some people might still feel, okay, that helps me, but I feel these are feeling a little bit like not quite like what you suggested, which is I can kind of go in and scan and quickly look through the stacks and pull something out and go through it. And so will we go somewhere beyond that in the future, like holographic images of books where you could literally have a holographic shelf, kind of touch something, have it come out at you and, flip through the pages. I think that is a certain possibility. I did a little research in holographic technology, and we're, in some ways, some of that's already out there, but it's just not commercialized yet. So that will take some time.
I know one of the other speakers was talking about exhibits and events, and they have this constant, in their library, constant stream of exhibits. And I thought, well, that's probably building on where you're looking at, too, to have, and of course we have, too. We've had a long program of events, library events, and all this.
Exhibits are great for that, for getting people to, you're exposing them to something they might not otherwise have discovered. And so it could spark some curiosity in them about wanting to explore something further. And so exhibits are great for that. And I mentioned in the talk today something that one of our more creative librarians did, which is called curated stacks, which is really a visual bibliography where you're setting up a display that is information about books around a particular topic. And the nice thing about it is that it's actually student curated. So it's not the librarians that are doing it, but finding students who have a passion for a certain subject area and they want to share it with other students. So working together with a librarian, we can set up something somewhere in the library on shelves where the student is displaying their handiwork. And it's up to the student to determine how creative that will be. We're very lucky at my institution, Temple University, that we have a lot of design and art students who are really good at this kind of thing.
Well, that struck me too when I was watching and then listening to you. That I thought, well, yeah, that's a great idea, having students involved and let them, because the kids themselves they'll be interested. They'll know what others are interested in. It'll generate some of that. Let me switch gears though a little bit and ask you about some of the upheaval that scholarly publishing and scholarly communication is going through with open access. We're making this transition from digital to print. Peer review is, there's some issues about peer review. Could you just talk a little bit about your impressions of that? And then maybe what librarians or what the role librarians could have in educating their users and bringing them along as these things change and develop?
Sure. I think, I would say going back about 2 years or so ago, I was myself a little bit not skeptical, that's probably not the right word, but somewhat disappointed that we haven't just been making enough progress, in the whole open access environment. But it seemed like in the last 2 years or so, there's been some real breakthroughs, I think, particularly last year where it seemed like faculty were finally getting it. And you saw faculty taking it upon themselves to create conversations with other faculty about, why are we giving away our content and then having our institutions buy it back at on unreasonable prices? Why are we not taking more control over our own content and trying to create a new system of scholarly publishing? That combined with some other things made me feel much more positive about the direction in which we're heading with open access. And in fact, I wrote one of my columns at the beginning of the year about, I called it, this is the year of openness. And that we finally seem to be turning the corner, I think, in more people in higher education understanding what this issue is all about. And as I mentioned with the collision with collections, how faculty need to be a part of that in directing students into the library and working collaboratively with librarians. You could say very much the same thing about open access and changes in the peer review system, because it is the faculty that ultimately are the ones who are the generators of much of the content. And they need to be the ones to generate the changes. Now, clearly there are a lot of challenges with the current promotion and tenure systems in our institutions that keep the system going, as it is. But I'm feeling more positive and enthusiastic that that's going to be changing in time as we get a new generation of scholars. And I think more of the new generation of scholars are more open to social systems for open peer review, where they like the possibilities of putting some of their research up in a public space where it could then be reviewed by others, and scholarship is a conversation. And it can be taking place. One thing that is still a bit frustrating is that we continue to have some of the same old dialogue with the journal publishers. And hopefully that's an area where we'll continue to make some progress. But again, as long as I should say as institutions give away the content, we give away the control. And hopefully we're seeing a turn in the tide there, with perhaps more faculty being open to publishing in the open access environment.
I know you've also written about the growing openness to textbook alternatives.
Yes, that's
and this offers some opportunity for academic librarians. Can you expound
definitely,
on that a bit?
definitely. I do feel that academic librarians can be real leaders on campus in promoting the idea of faculty seeking out alternate textbook approaches. It doesn't work for every discipline. You know, it's clear that in some areas, like a statistics course, it still may be that a textbook will be the best way to teach that content. But on the other hand, we could work together in higher education to create more open textbooks, and you see that's exactly what's happening with the OpenStax, for example, out of Rice University, I want to say, where they're trying to increase the number of open textbooks for very popular courses. What we're doing at Temple University is a slightly different project. You know, we're not having our faculty write open textbooks, but we're trying to shift it a little bit more away from traditional commercial expensive textbooks and over more to, hey, why don't we take advantage of the licensed content we already have, as well as open educational resources, and blend those together to create an alternate textbook, which I like to think of as a digital learning materials. And we've had quite a bit of success with that. Again, it doesn't work for every faculty member, but those who have tried it have gotten very good results with it as far as, well, I'll give you an example. When we have the expensive traditional textbooks, we know that not all the students buy the textbooks. I think the research is that as many as half of the students will forego even buying a textbook because they can't afford it, or they'll share a textbook with another student. Or, as most librarians know, the first 2 weeks of the semester, what's the question you get over and over again? Do you have my textbook? Do you have the text? So, you know, the students are really scrambling for alternatives to textbooks, and the faculty know this. So I think this is, you know, whereas trying to have faculty understand the values of open access journal publishing, I think they really get open textbooks because they, in many cases, understand that this is helping the students. And so they are motivated to want to do that. And from the faculty that we've had in our project, and I know that other librarians who are trying this at their institutions get very good feedback. Number one, the learning improves because you're not creating a barrier. Every student now has access to all the learning materials that are needed for the course. They don't have to pay for it. The library has either paid for it already or it's some open educational resource. Then the students will actually do the reading as opposed to not having access to the textbook. Or I always tell the story about when I was on the reference desk and a student came up and asked if we had textbooks for his course, and it turned out that it was like an environmental science course. And we had a version of the book, I don't know, maybe from 10 years ago. And the student said, oh, that's fine, I'll take it. Now, how can you be a student in an environmental science course using a book that's 10 years out of date? So that just pretty much says it all right there. We have to do a better job. And so I was really pleased to see, you know, we started this 3 years ago. And since then, I think many other libraries are exploring trying to encourage faculty to use alternate textbook type materials, and it's we can be leaders in this area because we can, for one thing, we can help faculty assemble the content.
Actually, when you that last sentence, we can be leaders in this area. It makes me wonder, and I'd be interested in your views on this. With all this disruption that's going on, there are tremendous opportunities as well. What do you see libraries looking like and librarians doing 5, 10, maybe 20 years down the road with all these, everything's percolating kind of. What do you see as our future?
Well, I think content will always be important. And I don't know where things will be headed. Someone like David Lewis says that, you know, open access is inevitable and that eventually at some point in the future, you know, all the content will be free. Well, if everything's free, what do they need librarians for to manage it? I look at companies like Cipics, which is here at the conference, and they're certainly doing some very interesting work with creating a content delivery and management system that, hey, they could create, and they are creating relationships with the publishers where they could quite potentially, offer faculty the opportunity to get access to the content, and how possible or how feasible is it that things could change in the next 10 or 20 years where we don't give the money to the library to buy everything, we give it to the department, and faculty can go out and buy whatever they want on these systems. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but hey, the technology is there. So I would like to believe that in the future, the most important thing we can do is focus more on, what are the solutions people need to help them be either academically successful, become lifelong learners. If it's a faculty member, how can we save them time? How can we help them be more productive? How can we help our institutions to retain students and help them achieve graduation? So I see a lot of that as more the library as a solutions provider rather than an ingredient supplier.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there might be great opportunities for us in this area, and part of it is sort of being like a grassroots leader on your campus. It's looking at where there are gaps. Where are there things that need to be accomplished? Where are there things where faculty and others are complaining about, hey, why aren't we doing this? How come we can't do this or that? And the library being savvy about, okay, maybe this is an opportunity for us to be the ones on campus who can do this. And I think the alternate textbook really comes out of that, and that you hear students and faculty complaining about textbook costs. And sure, we have other possibilities. We can, rent them the books. More faculty are trying to encourage digital textbooks because it saves some money. But hey, here's a whole other area we can kind of step in, and I imagine we'll see more opportunities like that in the future. And I do talk quite a bit in my other blog, Designing Better Libraries, about something else that I think is quite important, which is as our user community has many more options for where they can go for their information, what is it that we need to be thinking about to create a much better library experience for them, where it's something that's memorable, it's different, it creates loyalty and enthusiasm, and you have folks like you mentioned going out and doing word of mouth about the library, where they're telling other people, hey, I got some really great help at the library, and I was able to, be successful in my paper. You should go talk to this librarian. And I think we're heading in that direction. If you look at what's happening with many librarians who are moving beyond just subject specialty into being outreach experts, embedded librarians, blended librarians, looking for creative ways to get out of the library and work very closely with faculty and their students to help them build solutions to whatever challenges they might be having.
It seems to require more of an entrepreneurial spirit.
Some people would say that.
Part of
I wouldn't be the only one.
To kind of jump out there and and really make an
Well,
impression.
if we wait around for someone to come and ask us, we may be waiting a long time.
Right, that's the old model,
Yeah.
where we wait at the reference desk
Yeah.
for folks to come and ask them.
And some of those models still work. I mean, it really depends on your library environment. And I guess you just have to be very savvy about looking at all the different possibilities. I mean, the challenge is that, how much can we actually do when before we get too thinly spread. And so that'll be a challenge we have, because it's unlikely that we're going to continually get more and more resources to do all these things. So we have to be strategic in our thinking about where do we want to put our energies.
Do you have any other questions, Shelby? We've been ending our interviews with kind of a trick question.
Okay.
It's not really, well, it kind of is, kind of isn't. But if you were sitting in Jack or my chair, what question would you ask yourself?
Oh, what question would I ask myself? I think the question that I would ask myself is, what is it about the work that you do that keeps you motivated to continue to be passionate about the work of academic librarianship? Because, it can be frustrating sometimes. In the higher education environment, you see all the changes that are taking place, and you do wonder if things are moving on, and, what will be our role. And the response I tend to give to something like that is, I think the work that we do is really important. And I think the work that we do makes a difference for people. And I think that comes back to the whole presentation this morning about trying to focus in on even just one aspect of some of the things that we do, like building collections and wanting to get people to connect with and engage with those collections. And I really think that it was great to have the opportunity to come to the Charleston Conference and connect with people who do that work. I come from sort of the other side of the operation in public services, where we're working more at connecting people with the collections and helping them make use of it. But I think, as I said in the talk today, this idea of creating collisions within our collections, or collections are for collisions, is something that is really essential to the work that all of us do. And then I think it's something that is important and that we can be passionate about.
Well, we're delighted that you came and that you presented this morning, and we're obviously delighted that you're here with us right now.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you very much.
We really appreciate it. Thank you very
Well, thank you,
Thank you.
Tom, for inviting me, and thank you for the great questions.
much.